Welcome to Eden Lake, a gated community of 50 superior New England homes due to be built on 300 acres of beautiful English countryside. Cracking set of pylons, proper English film this. So our protagonist for this one is Steve, played by Michael Fassbender, and his partner Jenny, portrayed by Kelly Reilly, who have just finished work for the week. That Friday night feeling is sweet bliss, and all you corporate dogs out there will know exactly what I'm talking about. Steve is planning to take Jenny on a romantic weekend to a quarry. Oh, you got my motor running there, Steve. The design stage for the housing development on a beautiful lake is being completed and construction is set to begin the following week. Steve knows about this hidden gem and has taken Jenny to see the beautiful landscape before it's gone forever. We'll learn about Steve's big plans to propose for the weekend as the camera pans down to his hands where he's holding a ring as he's waiting outside of Jenny's school to pick her up. The couple hit the road and begin their journey. As they near their destination, the lights turn green, but there's a bunch of kids on bikes who zip across the road without looking, yelling obscenities as they ride off into the distance. Basically just a bunch of yobs who have nothing better to do with their time but cause havoc and violence. And in the UK, we call these people chavs. Steve pulls into the accommodation that they've booked after checking in, and they go into the beer garden to enjoy a few drinks before bed. And this is where Eden Lake really presents its main theme here, which acts as a golden thread for the duration of the film. With us not really knowing what Steve's occupation is and discovering that Jenny is a primary school teacher, the protagonists are presented in a way that's very normal, middle class, inoffensive, a down-to-earth English couple. But there's a very clear mismatch between them and their surroundings. There's a distinctive division in social class, which is alluded to first with the teens on their bikes, and then with Steve complaining to Jenny about a child that needs a good smack, which literally happens here. It's a stereotype for the underclass to punish their children physically and with aggression if they're misbehaving. This is presented to us early on to give us the feeling that Steve and Jenny are in a place that they don't really belong, where others think differently here. This is further supported by the shouting that they can hear through the thin walls in their hotel room, which clearly doesn't deter them still from giving each other an MOT. The next day arrives and they begin a short drive to Eden Lake. As they approach the sign, it says 50 superior New England homes are due to be built on the lake in due course. But on the opposite side of this sign, well, there's some questionable messaging on here. As amusing as it is, this subtle inclusion just shows the contrast between the type of people who currently hang about here and what's going to be renovated into a domestic dwelling for the upper classes. The couple continue to the beach, parking their car off the beaten track a few hundred metres from their final destination. They begin to set out their stall for the afternoon, and this is where the nightmare fuel begins. A couple of teenagers are messing about, bullying a young Indian boy called Adam directly across from the beach from where they are. Steve shrugs this off and says, boys will be boys, and then the worst thing ever happens. More of them arrive, shouting, swearing, playing music, even their dog runs up to Jenny and starts salivating all over her. And then we meet the nightmare fuel of the episode, Brett. What a stupid name, man, but splendidly played by Jack O'Connell in his very first feature-length film. Brett is a delinquent teenager and the ringleader of the group. He's severely unhinged and rules with an iron fist amongst the teens. At any point he can just fly off the handle, and I think it's this unpredictability that keeps the others in fear of what he might do next. What he says goes, and everybody takes their cues from him. The antisocial behaviour continues, and Steve approaches them, asking for them to turn the noise down. Brett responds with a, "Can't hear you, mate."
Turn your sounds down, mate.
In his Mancunian accent. This is such a typical smart-ass, provocative response, and Steve proceeds to turn it down and then walk away, to which Brett defiantly turns it straight back up. It's at this point Steve somewhat concedes to the teens. I think in this moment Brett maybe smelled weakness and saw potential to terrorise the couple for the weekend purely because it's something for them to do. As the group eventually grow bored and leave the area, Brett decides to whip out his man parts and waft them in Jenny's face right in front of Steve. I mean, nowadays that's probably classed as sexual assault, and Steve does absolutely nothing about it. It's one of these moments where you pretty much have to stand up for your missus, but you're completely outnumbered, even if they're only 15 or 16 years old. Hoping that puts an end to it by failing to react, the couple continue with their weekend away. But then it takes a turn for the worse. The group of kids have gone and stolen their car and then try to run them over with it. Now this is where things get really serious. Their actions are now directly impacting on Jenny and Steve, and this is truly where the terrorising starts. Absolutely, they need to drive this car back to wherever they've come from, and let's face it, a car's worth thousands of pounds. So this move from the gang forces a conflict between the two parties, a situation which can't just be ignored and swept under the carpet. In a scuffle between Steve and Brett, where he's trying to retain his car keys, one of the other boys takes out a switchblade, which ends up stabbing and killing Brett's dog. This sends him into a complete frenzy as he orders the gang to hunt down Steve and Jenny. It's in this next scene where things get really rough to watch. Again, I'm going to be really careful with what I show on screen here, but after Steve and Jenny flee the scene and crash their car, the gang begins to bear down on them. Jenny makes an escape to try and get help, but Steve's trapped in the car and he ultimately gets dragged off into the woods by the gang. They proceed to tie him up to a wooden post using barbed wire and wrap the lead of Brett's dog around his neck. Brett orders Paige, the only girl that's part of the gang, to start filming, and what he does is he forces everyone to have a dig, which is British slang for stab him. Jenny hears Steve's screams and returns to where they are, and she's forced to sit and watch them torture him from the tree line. They later catch Jenny and bind her to the same post where Steve is, and at this point he's completely bled out, and Brett forces Adam, the young, timid, unassuming boy from earlier on the beach, to pour petrol over him and set him ablaze. He then grabs both the youngest members in headlocks and forces them to ask Jenny the question, is it warm? She's literally moments away from being burnt alive with her dead husband already absolute toast, and she's being asked if the fire's warm and pleasant. It's just sick. She manages to untangle herself and run away up the bank, so Brett grabs a tyre, puts it round Adam's head and shouts for Jenny to come back here or he'll burn him alive. He proceeds to pour petrol on him, and well, listen to this. This is evil. It's not just antisocial behaviour anymore. It feels like a This Is England racially aggravated attack on the boy. Whilst other members of the gang sometimes momentarily resist Brett, all he does is puts more pressure on them to try and bend the knee to him, which they do, but he burns Adam alive at the stake. It's just horrific. And every scene in this film that contains the gang just gets more and more charged and intense over time. First the dog salivating over Jenny and then defecating near them, then Brett exposing himself to her. The car is then stolen and Brett joyrides it to the point of nearly running them over. He then ties Steve up, orders the other members of the gang to stab him once each, and then he attempts to burn Jenny alive, but he doesn't get what he wants, so he burns an innocent boy alive who looks so much younger than him as well. I mean, just surely it can't get worse than this. And then it does. Jenny manages to evade the gang for the most part, but stabs Cooper in the neck, the youngest member, in a fit of rage. She manages to follow the power lines back into town, and salvation is in sight, and she crashes a garden party which has been hosted amongst the locals. The women immediately jump into action, take her into the house and begin tending to her. Jenny is absolutely being through the wars here. She's covered in waste from a wheelie bin that she's hid in and has severe wounds from her efforts to escape, but she's in safe hands now and she's going to be alright. This is until one of the parents gets a phone call, and it's from Brett. These are his parents. These are Brett's parents, and it's quite obvious that the other people there are the parents of the other boys as well. Brett's mum clearly hears the news that Cooper is being killed and that Jenny's description is being reeled off on the phone. In a fit of panic, Jenny wants to go to the bathroom to be sick. When she gets in there, there's no windows at all to escape from. She's trapped. John, Brett's dad, he breaks down the door and Brett's standing there when the door opens to verify it's her. John confirms that Cooper is also his son.
She killed a little one. Look at her.
And then he proceeds to say, just put her in the shower, as two other men also join him in dragging Jenny back into the bathroom and slamming the door shut, with our desperate screams reverberating around the rest of the house. John's aggression and abuse is clearly staying Brett over the years as he reproduces these behaviours onto his own peers in a bid to emulate his dad in what has become the norm during his adolescence. The final scene shows Brett deleting the evidence off Paige's phone and staring at himself in the mirror. He's ordered a brutal stabbing tonight, along with burning a child alive, but his expression isn't one of remorse. It's almost like he thinks he's coming of age and turning into a man. Brett is truly a product of his environment. This is a very, very angry family who are possibly annoyed at their own circumstances, the government, maybe the system who they may feel have oppressed them for many generations. But this working class neighbourhood takes care of its own, and anybody who doesn't fit that mould is in real danger. Let me know down in the comments what you thought of Eden Lake. Did you think that Jenny managed to escape, or is the ending really as bleak as it first seems? I've been Hugh from Unleash the Ghouls, and I'll see you later.